Akiteru was a high school boy with an unusual view of love. To him, affection wasn't something expressed through teasing or playful provocation. While others found joy in taunting the ones they liked, he believed sincerity carried far more weight. He preferred to treat those he cared about with warmth and kindness, convinced that genuine gestures spoke louder than jokes. Yet his heart betrayed him in curious ways. Despite his gentle ideals, he found himself drawn to bold, outspoken girls. The contrast between his beliefs and his desires amused him, but he never wavered from his conviction that love should be shown through care, not mockery. One evening, as he made his way back to his room, Akiteru heard a faint noise from behind the door. When he opened it, he was greeted by an unexpected sight. Iroha Kohinata, his classmate, and the younger sister of his friend Ozuma, lounging comfortably inside without permission. Annoyed, he unplugged the television, prompting Iroha to complain that he should have knocked first. Akiteru reminded her that it was his room and she had no reason to be there. But Iroha argued back with her usual sharp wit, claiming he must have known she was inside. She teased him relentlessly, questioning what he would have done if she had been changing and accusing him of wanting to see her naked, even threatening to call the police. Unfazed, Akiteru countered that she was technically trespassing. Iroha, never one to back down, smirked and claimed the law would still favor her side. She then suggested he secretly enjoyed her company, holding up a key he had once given her as supposed proof that he didn't mind her visits. Akiteru quickly corrected her, saying it was never meant for that purpose. Amused, Iroha continued to push his buttons, joking that he would lie on the bed after she left just to smell her scent. Irritated, Akiteru declared that he would erase every trace of her presence the moment she stepped out. Pretending to be offended, Iroha called herself his little sister, though Akiteru firmly denied any such bond. She then reasoned that since she was Ozuma's sister, that technically made her his sister-in-law. Akiteru dismissed the claim as absurd, insisting they were strangers. But Iroha, lost in her imagination, added that if he ever married her brother, they would indeed become siblings. Her nonsensical logic left Akiteru exasperated, and he told her to stop fantasizing about impossible things. Before the argument could continue, Akiteru received a call from his boss, who also happened to be his uncle, Tsukunomi. Hoping to avoid embarrassment, he asked Iroha to stay quiet during the conversation. Tsukunomi began by mentioning Akiteru's bold request to join his company without going through the standard hiring process. Expecting rejection, Akiteru braced himself, but his uncle surprised him by agreeing, but not without a few conditions. Tsukunomi's first question was whether Akiteru had a girlfriend. Unfortunately, Iroha overheard and began making suspicious noises in the background, making it sound like he wasn't alone. Thinking quickly, Akiteru claimed that he had adopted a cat, which managed to convince his uncle that he was still single. After ending the call, Akiteru scolded Iroha for almost ruining his chance at a professional opportunity. The next day at school, Akiteru ran into Ozuma, Iroha's brother and one of his closest friends. During their conversation, Ozuma mentioned that his sister might actually like Akiteru. The idea seemed ridiculous to him. He dismissed it outright, saying that Iroha only enjoyed messing with him. But Ozuma explained that this was precisely how his sister showed affection, through teasing. The comment reminded Akiteru of the theory he once rejected, that people often tease those they love. Still, he couldn't bring himself to believe it, insisting that someone like Iroha would never fall for an average guy like him. Later that day, after classes ended, a student approached Akiteru to tell him that a beautiful first-year girl wanted to meet him. Curious, he went to see who it was, only to find Iroha waiting for him. To his surprise, she was acting unusually polite and refined, trying to pass herself off as a model student. Akiteru, recognizing her act immediately, could tell she was putting on a show. Iroha ignored his disapproval and asked him to walk home with her. He told her to wait so he could grab his things and call Ozuma to join them, but she quickly stopped him, insisting she wanted to go home with him alone. Her straightforwardness made him suspicious once again, and he'd assumed she was trying to mess with him. He told her to stop flirting if she didn't mean it, since he didn't want anyone toying with his feelings. Instead of backing off, Iroha raised her voice and declared to everyone nearby that the two of them were dating. Her sudden announcement shocked their classmates and left Akiteru speechless, flipping the situation so that he looked like the one deceiving her. Moments later, Ozuma approached to see what was happening. Iroha claimed that she and Akiteru were dating but were currently going through a rough patch. Akiteru, bewildered, pulled her aside to ask what she was trying to accomplish. Iroha simply repeated her claim, saying that since his uncle had already asked about his love life, she might as well play the role of his girlfriend. Then with a smirk, she mocked him, saying it was strange for someone as ordinary as him to date someone like her. Still, she insisted that pretending to be a couple would make things simpler for everyone. Akiteru, humiliated by her words, refused outright, saying his only focus was on his future. But Iroha suddenly changed her tone. She grabbed his arm and her voice trembling. told him he was so focused on his goals that he forgot about the people who cared for him. Her emotional shift caught him off guard, but before he could respond, she laughed it off and revealed that she was only joking. She mocked him for falling for it, teasing that he must have started believing her. Frustrated, Akiteru told himself never to trust anything she said again. That evening, Tsukinami invited Akiteru to a cafe for a meeting, mentioning that a third person would be joining them. During their discussion, Tsukinami praised the game Akiteru and his small development team had created, noting that it had already surpassed 1 million downloads. Akiteru, however, felt there was still plenty of room for improvement, comparing his team's work to that of major studios. Tsukinami reminded him that their accomplishment was extraordinary for such a small group. Eventually, Akiteru asked about the conditions Tsukinami had hinted at during their last conversation. Before answering, his uncle's attention drifted toward a waitress and he began flirting with her, making the woman visibly uncomfortable. Taking the chance to excuse himself, Akiteru went to the restroom only to accidentally bump into a girl who had entered by mistake. When he returned to the table, he realized that the same girl was the third person Tsukinami had mentioned earlier. To his surprise, it was Mashiro Tsukinami, his cousin and Tsukinomi's daughter. Still confused about the situation, Akiteru listened as Tsukinami revealed his plan. Since Mashiro would soon transfer to a co-ed school, he wanted Akiteru to pose as her boyfriend to keep other boys from approaching her. Though the idea seemed absurd, Akiteru reluctantly agreed. Mashiro, hesitant but with little choice, accepted as well. With both in agreement, Tsukinami finalized the deal, warning Akiteru not to forget that Mashiro was only a pretend girlfriend, and that any genuine affection toward her would lead to serious consequences. It was, as he put it, like asking a wolf to guard the sheep, trusting instinct, not to betray reason. Until then, Akiteru had just arrived at school when, as usual, Iroha began teasing him with the same irritating tone she always used. That day, Mashiro transferred to the new school and was assigned to the same class as Akiteru, creating a wave of curiosity among their classmates. During the first lesson, Mashiro introduced herself shyly and, without realizing it, mentioned that she was dating Akiteru, leaving everyone stunned. A curious student sitting in front asked how they met, and in her flustered state, Mashiro blurted out that they had met in the bathroom. Realizing how strange that sounded, she immediately felt guilty and sat down, silently hoping Akiteru would stay quiet, knowing his silence was important. Akiteru, however, worried that couples who didn't communicate might raise suspicion, while Mashiro thought it was enough that people simply believed they were together. Even Ozuma was shocked to hear Akiteru had a girlfriend and realized he would have to explain things later. During recess, Akiteru told Ozuma everything about his agreement with the student council president, leaving his friend with an uneasy feeling, almost as if he had become part of a zombie story. Akiteru joked that all they needed now was a mischievous little sister to complete the scene. Ozuma caught the reference to Iroha, though Akiteru refused to acknowledge it. Meanwhile, Suzuki was surprised to learn that Akiteru had a girlfriend, since he always saw him with Iroha. Mashiro, noticing Suzuki's watchful gaze, gave Akiteru a sharp look filled with quiet jealousy. Akiteru quickly clarified that Iroha was only a younger classmate. Unlike him, Suzuki was fixated on their teacher, Sumair, even though he knew she only paid attention to muscular men. Determined, he decided to start exercising. Soon after, Mashiro told Akiteru to buy rice cakes, saying it was part of his role as a boyfriend. Akiteru hesitated, unwilling to move, but when Mashiro hinted that she might end their relationship if he refused, he reluctantly gave in and went. When he returned, Mashiro seemed uneasy, and for a moment, he thought she might be jealous. He quickly dismissed the idea, reminding himself their relationship was only pretend and that she still held some resentment toward him. The next class was with Sumair, who asked if anyone was brave enough to admit they hadn't done their homework. A student raised a hand and was quickly forgiven. Akiteru noticed Mashiro's unease under Sumair's strict demeanor, realizing the situation might be difficult for her. After an exhausting study period, the break arrived. Before class ended, Sumair called Akiteru to her office, surprising everyone and leaving Suzuki envious of the attention. Moments later, Akiteru entered Sumair's cluttered office filled with strange objects. To his surprise, Sumair suddenly knelt and begged for forgiveness, revealing that despite her intimidating reputation, she was at a disadvantage before him. Among students, she was known as the Poison Queen, but in truth, she worked as an illustrator for Akiteru's game group and often failed to deliver manuscripts on time. That explained her desperate tone. She still had unfinished tasks for the students' exam project. Akiteru spoke firmly, prompting her to admit that her stern persona was just a facade. When he discovered her latest manuscript wasn't ready, he demanded a progress report instead of scolding her. Sumair refused to protect her image, irritating him enough to apply a shoulder massage technique that made her yelp and beg for forgiveness. It was almost absurd to see the school's most feared teacher acting so submissively before Akiteru. To understand why, it was necessary to look back. While developing the game project, Akiteru had visited several festivals searching for illustrators, but no one accepted his offer. Exhausted, he stopped at a booth selling adult stories and discovered the author was Sumire. Afraid her identity as a strict teacher might be exposed, she reluctantly joined the project. Since then, Akiteru had been able to obtain her manuscripts whenever needed, even though she often grew furious with him. Before returning to class, Akiteru warned her that if she failed to deliver again, he would expose her pseudonym. Overwhelmed with exam duties, Sumire sighed helplessly. Akiteru planned to rest before dealing with her again, but she kept provoking him, forcing him to cut her deadline in half. Before he left, Sumire asked about Mashiro. Akiteru explained the agreement with the president, and Sumire expressed sympathy, saying it must have been difficult for him. He assured her it was the best decision for the group. She mentioned that the school had informed her about Mashiro's past, that she had been bullied until she was forced to leave her old school. No one knew the full story, only that her classmates had abandoned her. Sumire asked Akiteru to take care of her, and he promised he already intended to. She tried to stall for time with compliments, but Akiteru noticed and ended the conversation. After school, Akiteru invited Mashiro to go home together, but she immediately refused. Remembering their act as a couple, she worried about what others might think. Ozuma suggested Akiteru find a way to get closer to her, but it wasn't easy, as Mashiro had shown clear dislike from the beginning. As Akiteru was about to leave, Iroha appeared and began teasing him again, wrapping her arms around him. The unexpected contact embarrassed him. She leaned close, whispering playful provocations that deepened his discomfort. He knew it was her usual mischief, yet he couldn't help wondering how someone her age could think of such things. What troubled him most was that while he and Mashiro were pretending to date, Iroha's behavior risked making everything look suspicious. If Mashiro saw them, things could become even worse. Trying to turn the situation around, Akiteru lifted Iroha onto his back, catching her off guard. His sudden move left her red-faced and flustered. He planned to hold her until she admitted defeat and realized her teasing had gone too far. When she remained stubborn, Akiteru carried her across the schoolyard, leaving her completely trapped. Overwhelmed, Iroha eventually apologizing to Akiteru for lying and provoking him earlier. Satisfied, Akiteru set her down, treating it as a lesson from her constant teasing. On their way home, Akiteru suddenly asked her how to approach a difficult girl. Surprised, she listened as he explained the agreement with the president. From that day on, Iroha decided to act as his advisor and help him win Mashiro over. The next morning, Akiteru behaved like an obedient companion, catering to Mashiro's every need, which only irritated her more. She thought his actions looked ridiculous, almost like a clown's performance. Feeling unfairly judged, Akiteru grew frustrated. While Mashiro continued to scold him, Iroha appeared once again to tease them both. Akiteru used the opportunity to reveal that the whole plan had been Mashiro's idea from the start. When Mashiro looked at Iroha, she immediately recognized her as Akiteru's supposed younger sister, recalling stories she had heard from former classmates. Mashiro's expression darkened as she became convinced that the two were working together to irritate her. Later, Akiteru and Iroha discovered that Mashiro had moved into apartment 5001, right next to theirs. Iroha, Ozuma's real younger sister, lived in apartment 503 but continued to pretend to be Akiteru's sister. Coincidentally, apartment 504 belonged to Sumire, the infamous Poison Queen. When Mashiro found out, she muttered that Akiteru and everyone around him were nothing but troublemakers before running inside. Akiteru realized that by moving apartments, Mashiro was also trying to redefine her surroundings and regain control over her own space. This understanding strengthened his resolve to help her no matter how complicated things became. Akiteru called his team to his room one evening announcing his latest idea, a welcome party for Mashiro, the new neighbor who had just moved into their apartment building. He had already set the date for Friday at 8 p.m. Iroha doubted Mashiro would show up, but Akiteru, wearing his usual confident grin, told her not to worry. He already had a plan. All they had to do was bother Mashiro enough until she gave in. Before that plan could unfold, the Fifth Floor Alliance decided to celebrate something else, finishing their project before the deadline. The small party started with laughter, snacks, and drinks, though Sumire took that last part too seriously. Akiteru scolded her for drinking more than usual, teasing that she was always the one who submitted her work late anyway. Iroha was unusually quiet and polite, which unsettled him more than any of her teasing. She explained that she just felt a little out of place, since she wasn't officially part of their team but still appreciated being invited. Akiteru gave her a curious look. It was rare to see her act polite, and it somehow threw him off. Ozuma complimented Akiteru's cooking, especially the roast beef, to which Akiteru returned the praise, crediting Ozuma's tech setup for helping their uploads go smoothly. Ozuma brushed it off, saying it wasn't talent, just simple stuff anyone could do, and that Akiteru was the one who gave him the opportunity to use his skills in the first place. Watching them, Iroha smiled quietly. Then Ozuma realized Namako wasn't there. Akiteru explained that their scenario writer had personal deadline. Namako had joined the team after Akiteru sent a random fan letter inviting her to collaborate on their game. To his shock, she had actually replied and agreed. They'd never met in person, but she always seemed reliable and easy to talk to, unlike Sumair, who immediately protested when she realized he was talking about her. Drunk and dramatic, she tried to hug him, but he dodged. To get things back on track, Akiteru called everyone's attention and started discussing the plan for Mashiro's party. 6 days before the event, Akiteru made his first attempt to invite Mashiro by repeatedly ringing her doorbell. When she finally opened the door, he greeted her with his best grin, only for the door to slam shut in his face. Undeterred, he tried again on Sunday, but the doorbell had broken, so he stuffed her mailbox full of invitation letters instead. 4 days before the party, he passed her a note during class. Their back-and-forth scribbles quickly turned into Mashiro asking if this counted as bullying. He denied it, insisting he just wanted to invite her to dinner. She wasn't convinced, pointing out that her mailbox looked more like a trash can now. When he asked for her line ID, she immediately refused. By Monday, Mashiro was ignoring him completely. On Wednesday, he caught her at the elevator, reminding her about the party, but she accused him of stalking her. The next day at school, she scolded him for trying to invite her in public. Even so, Akiteru didn't give up. Later that day, he and Iroha went shopping for party supplies. Iroha got distracted by a stall offering free samples of cheese-stuffed sausages. She urged him to try one, but he refused, embarrassed. The saleslady mistook them for a couple and insisted he take one for his girlfriend. Blushing, he finally agreed, but as he reached for the sample, Iroha mischievously pulled it away, teasing him to beg for it. Seeing through her game, Akiteru decided to play along. The saleslady watched fondly, smiling at the couple. As they moved on, Akiteru asked how she could say, "I love you" to people so easily. Iroha said it came naturally when she genuinely cared. He compared her to Mashiro, who couldn't seem to be honest with her feelings. When he admitted he still hadn't gotten Mashiro to accept the invitation, Iroha teased that maybe he wasn't trying hard enough. She reminded him that when he really wanted something, he always found a way, like how he convinced both Ozuma and Sumair to join the project. Akiteru explained it was just because he saw potential in them. He hated seeing their talents wasted. Iroha smiled at that, saying his real gift was helping people bridge the gap between their wants and their dreams. While reaching for a can of tomato sauce on a high shelf, she lost balance, nearly falling, but Akiteru caught her in time. Laughing it off, she added that one of his best traits was making sure no one in their group took their freedom for granted. Maybe that was why everyone trusted him. Her words made him more determined than ever to bring Mashiro to the party. Meanwhile, in her apartment, Mashiro told herself there was no way he'd succeed. The day of the party finally came. Akiteru couldn't catch her during class, so he met up with Ozuma to confirm the preparations. Everything was ready. Confident, Akiteru declared that the operation to bring Mashiro to the party was officially starting. He caught up to her at the shoe lockers, apologizing and promising no more tricks. She didn't believe him. He offered to walk home together since they lived in the same building, but before he could say more, she sprinted off. He sighed, wondering how much she really hated him, then ran after her anyway. The plan depended on it. Mashiro, realizing he was still following her, ran faster, yelling for him to stop. He claimed he was just running home because he wanted to, which only made her more suspicious. Eventually, she stopped by the riverbank, out of breath. She told him to stop worrying about her. She didn't fit in with groups and didn't want to be dragged into his life. Akiteru frowned, asking where she planned to go. She never connected with anyone. He admitted he might have made mistakes, but said she should at least try to make friends. Before she could reply, Mashiro slipped and he lunged forward to catch her, both of them tumbling straight into the river. When she tripped again, he caught her, steadying her against him. Back on shore, he joked that they looked like matching drowned rats. To his surprise, Mashiro laughed for the first time, calling it the worst couple look ever. Akiteru smirked and teased that maybe the gods were blessing their fake relationship, to which Mashiro dryly replied that such gods deserved to die. He told her maybe if she kept praying, she'd start feeling better about herself. She muttered that praying wouldn't make people who hated her suddenly like her. Curious, he asked why she was so stubborn despite his efforts. Mashiro accidentally blurted out something about a deal he made with her father, then quickly took it back, saying she knew it wasn't his fault. She admitted she just didn't want him to hate her. Akiteru assured her no one hated her. She confessed that she was scared of not fitting in, of being ignored. Seeing her on the verge of tears, he told her it was okay to feel that way. He admitted he didn't stand out either, that he was just an ordinary person with average skills. She immediately disagreed, saying someone ordinary couldn't lead the Fifth Floor Alliance. Akiteru was surprised she knew about the group. Mashiro explained that her father often talked about the game since it earned good money. Akiteru corrected her. The profits just went back into development. She commented that he could easily be the most popular student in school, but he said no one even knew they made the game. He preferred it that way, keeping their success quiet so it wouldn't inflate anyone's ego. Mashiro smiled softly and called him weird. When they finally reached the apartment building, she still refused to attend the party, but thanked him for the invitation. Before she could enter her room, she noticed her door was unlocked. Akiteru stepped forward to check first. Together, they crept inside, tense, until confetti burst around them and cheers erupted. Mashiro stood frozen. Everyone from the 5th floor was there, yelling surprise. Akiteru sheepishly explained that this was actually his apartment. They just placed a fake divider to make it look like hers. Mashiro frowned, asking why they went so far when she didn't even consider them friends. Iroha admitted that none of them were really friends except for her and Ozuma, though she added she'd rather see them as a couple. Sumair immediately jumped in, creating an over-the-top romantic scenario between them until Akiteru hit her with a pillow. Iroha explained that they all just happened to live on the same floor and started doing things together naturally, especially because of the game. Mashiro noted that she already knew about it, and Iroha clarified she wasn't actually part of the dev team. Akiteru added that it was fine if Mashiro didn't think of them as friends yet. She could just think of them as her fake boyfriend's friends for now. He mentioned one missing member, Namako, who couldn't attend but was still an essential part of the group. Mashiro smiled faintly, finally agreeing to stay. By the end of the night, laughter filled the room. After the guests left, Iroha burst into Akiteru's room, nearly hugging him before he dodged. She got serious for a moment, praising him for pulling off the impossible, getting Mashiro to join. She thanked him for including her too, though she didn't say that she was secretly the voice actor for their game. Iroha reflected on her hidden role as the secret voice actor for the 5th Floor Alliance. None of the other members knew about her involvement, yet she was deeply grateful to be included in their gatherings as an outside participant. She felt a quiet happiness knowing that it had been Akiteru who first discovered and approached her, setting everything into motion. During one of their conversations, Akiteru decided to tell her about the past. He remembered the day he first met Ozuma. Out of curiosity, he had approached him and asked if he could see the experiments Ozuma was working on. Ozuma agreed, but only if Akiteru promised to stop by occasionally to check on his progress. That simple deal marked the beginning of their friendship. Not long after, Akiteru's parents left to work in another city, and he moved into the same building as Ozuma. One afternoon, Akiteru saw Ozuma studying the floor tiles. When asked what he was doing, Ozuma explained that he was playing with numbers in his head, using the tiles as reference points. Akiteru offered to let him stay at his place, but Ozuma declined, saying his sister would be home soon. Moments later, Iroha appeared, confused to see Ozuma waiting outside. Ozuma introduced him as his friend, neighbor, and classmate. Iroha looked surprised. She had never expected her brother to have a friend. Akiteru remembered her as quiet and polite, far different from the outspoken girl she would later become. The next day, Akiteru brought up Iroha, curious since Ozuma had never mentioned her and she was rarely seen around the building. Before he could continue, Sumair entered the classroom, drawing attention because many students believed she had been suspended. She approached Akiteru and Ozuma, asking to speak privately. Away from the others, she casually offered them candy, which Akiteru pointed out was against school rules. Sumair laughed it off, saying they were too uptight, especially over rumors that weren't true. She revealed that she had never been suspended, and the gossip disappointed her. During their talk, Sumair mentioned that she had heard Iroha was showing interest in delinquents like her and Asaji. Curious, she wanted to know what kind of girl Iroha really was. Ozuma struggled to describe his sister, which surprised Akiteru as Ozuma was usually straightforward. Sumair grew impatient, finding it strange that such a simple question had no clear answer. Akiteru reasoned privately that Ozuma probably didn't understand the intent behind her curiosity. Sumair eventually admitted that Asaji had noticed Iroha's apparent interest in their group, though she concluded that Iroha was likely just a typical honor student. Still, she confessed that if Iroha ever approached them, they would welcome her. After she left, Akiteru asked Ozuma why describing his sister had been so difficult. Ozuma confessed that they hardly spoke and shared little more than blood ties. Their parents were rarely home and their relationship had grown distant. Concerned, Akiteru decided to help somehow. He invited Ozuma to play games after school, hoping to bring him out of his isolation. When Akiteru arrived at Ozuma's apartment, he was surprised to find no television in the living room. Ozuma explained that he spent most of his time in his room, which turned out to be a chaotic mess of scattered tools, papers, and gadgets. He insisted that he liked it that way. It helped him think. As they set up the game console, Akiteru noticed Ozuma's custom-built computer and admired his technical skill. While they played, Akiteru heard Iroha come home. Curious, he excused himself under the pretense of using the bathroom and approached her room. It sounded as if she were talking to someone. Before he could make out the words, Iroha suddenly opened the door, catching him off guard. Startled, she nearly screamed, but Akiteru quickly covered her mouth and pulled her inside to prevent attention. Once she realized who he was, she struck him across the face. Mistaking his intentions, she accused him of sneaking into their apartment to eavesdrop, even wondering if he was stalking her. Before he could explain himself, her phone rang and she answered briefly before hanging up. The tension between them grew. Akiteru confronted her about her rumored connection with delinquents, but Iroha dismissed his concerns, insisting it was none of his business. He tried to reason that he only cared because he was friends with her brother, but she retorted that their friendship didn't give him the right to meddle. To her, Ozuma was practically a stranger. Realizing that pressing further would only make things worse, Akiteru left conflicted and worried about the siblings' distance. In the following days, Akiteru decided to investigate further. One afternoon, he left school early under the excuse of having a fever. The heat was stifling, so he stopped by a vending machine for water. Continuing his search, he heard a girl singing and playing the guitar. Recognizing her as Asagi, he approached. Asagi noticed his uniform and teased him for skipping class, but before he could respond, the oppressive heat overwhelmed him and he collapsed. Startled, Asagi called Sumire for help and together they managed to get him to safety. When Akiteru regained consciousness, he found his head resting on Sumire's lap. Though embarrassed, he was grateful, realizing the incident had strengthened their connection as friends, even if none of them knew that Iroha was secretly the voice behind their game. Later, Akiteru met with both Asagi and Iroha. He urged Asagi to reconsider her delinquent lifestyle, suggesting she might find more fulfillment as a regular student. Asagi argued that he didn't understand her and that she would be abandoning her friends if she changed. Akiteru clarified that he wasn't asking her to leave anyone behind. He simply wanted her to think about her choices. His insistence annoyed her, but he pointed out that she clearly had a passion for music and could do more with it. When he turned his attention to Iroha, she seemed hesitant and confused. Seeing this, Asagi explained that Iroha wasn't trying to become a musician at all but merely admired music and those who performed it. Iroha admitted this was true and confessed that she looked up to Asagi's confidence and freedom. Akiteru misunderstood at first, thinking they might be romantically involved, but the truth quickly became clear. Asagi then revealed that Iroha's home life was far stricter than anyone realized. Though she had access to technology, her mother forbade her from enjoying herself or developing hobbies. Iroha quietly confirmed this, admitting that her current actions were acts of quiet rebellion. She confessed that she didn't know what she truly wanted, having always lived under her mother's expectations. Hearing this, Akiteru felt the strong resolve take root. Both Iroha and Ozuma lacked freedom to explore their potential, while Asagi and Sumire were misunderstood for their choices despite their talents. He decided that he would find a way for all of them to pursue their passions freely while maintaining their studies. Though Asagi accused him of meddling, Akiteru remained determined, believing it would benefit everyone, including Ozuma. That night, inspiration struck. Akiteru visited Ozuma and proposed that they create a game together. Ozuma was surprised but agreed to listen. Akiteru explained that Ozuma could handle the programming while he developed the story, characters, and artwork. They began small, using public domain music to test how the project would come together. As they worked, Ozuma confessed that he enjoyed collaborating with Akiteru. For once, his ideas had meaning beyond personal curiosity. Akiteru shared that sense of fulfillment, proud of what they were creating. He already knew who would be the perfect testers for their project: Iroha and Asagi, the two people who had unknowingly inspired it all. They invited Asagi and Iroha to test their game. At first, Asagi seemed more distracted by the messy room than the game itself, but as she played, her focus sharpened, her expression softening into genuine interest. When the session ended, she bluntly called the game average. She criticized the music for sounding cheap, yet admitted that the gameplay was fun enough to make up for it. Akiteru explained that gameplay was the soul of every good game. He compared it to rock, paper, scissors, simple, complete, with clear rules and an obvious goal. That simplicity, he said, was the foundation of game design. Even with a small budget, they could still make something truly entertaining. He shared his dream of creating such games and thanked Ozuma, whose programming skill made it possible. Still, their biggest issue was music. Using free tracks wasn't enough. He wanted something original and professional. Asagi narrowed her eyes, suspecting what he was leading to. Sure enough, Akiteru asked if she'd like to help with the project. Iroha, startled by the offer, hesitated, but Akiteru reassured her there was plenty of work for everyone. Though Asagi tried to hide her excitement, Akiteru revealed that he had already contacted Otoi and gotten her approval. A spark lit in Asagi's eyes as she encouraged Iroha to join, saying it could free them from their dull routines. To everyone's surprise, Iroha refused. She apologized to Asagi for involving her in her personal issues and promised not to bother her again about joining the delinquents. She said she would continue supporting Asagi's performances before quietly excusing herself, leaving the group disappointed. Akiteru decided to follow her. He found Iroha sitting alone at a nearby park, talking to herself in multiple voices as though carrying out a full conversation. She was torn. She wanted to join the project but didn't know where she belonged. Unlike Asagi, whose musical talent was clear, Iroha felt uncertain of her own worth. Watching Asagi play earlier, she had seen genuine joy in her eyes and envied that spark. She wondered if she had any gift at all or if she was just pretending to be someone she wasn't. As Akiteru approached, he listened quietly, astonished by the range and realism of her voices. When Iroha finally noticed him, she panicked and hid behind the bench, mortified. Akiteru quickly assured her that he wasn't weirded out, only amazed. Though skeptical, she listened as he explained how impressed he was by her ability to switch between personalities so naturally. Iroha shyly admitted that voice acting had started as a hobby. She loved anime and cartoons as a child and began mimicking the characters for fun. But her mother disapproved, insisting she focus on studying. Iroha never understood why. It only made her feel guilty. When her mother eventually banned television, she began creating her own characters in secret. She soon realized she wasn't creative enough to invent new stories, so she started basing them on real people instead. Akiteru understood now why her characters felt so lifelike. He praised her for being able to improvise so well without a script. Iroha asked if he had a theater background, but he said no, his mother was a makeup artist and he had spent time observing her work. From that, he learned to read people, and he could see that Iroha had a natural grasp of human emotion. He also realized she would probably never pursue her gift, afraid of defying her mother. When he brought up Ozuma, Iroha admitted they'd grown distant and that she believed he no longer cared about her. Akiteru concluded that she was waiting for someone to save her, and she quietly agreed. That's when Akiteru promised he would be the one to change her life. Iroha hesitated but confessed that she genuinely enjoyed portraying different characters, even if it seemed pointless. Akiteru told her that kind of passion was exactly what made a good actor. For the first time, Iroha realized what she wanted to become one. He urged her to join their team, promising to keep it secret from her mother. When she asked why he was going so far for her, he said simply that it was for Ozuma's sake. She agreed to join, but only if he would call her by her first name without honorifics. A week later, Akiteru invited her to his apartment. Iroha arrived suspicious, accusing him of having ulterior motives. Akiteru stayed calm, assuring her that she was safe and could leave any time. She entered reluctantly and refused the drink he offered. Then she noticed the stack of acting textbooks on his desk. He explained that he bought them for her so she wouldn't need to spend her own money, and that keeping them there would prevent her mother from finding them. Realizing his sincerity, Iroha apologized for doubting him and thanked him sincerely. Akiteru soon created a training schedule. They started with vocal warm-ups, watched acting lessons online, and analyzed movies together. Iroha practiced dubbing by muting anime scenes and reciting the lines herself. One day, Otoy invited them over, excited to show them her completed studio. She led them to her family's old storehouse, which she had transformed into a recording space for their projects. Akiteru was amazed, and Otoy credited his encouragement for her motivation. Inside, Iroha asked if she could test the recording booth. Otoy agreed, though she seemed doubtful when Akiteru said Iroha could handle all the voices in the game herself. Iroha stepped into the booth and began recording. Her performance was flawless, each character distinct and expressive. By the time she finished, evening had fallen and Otoy was speechless at her versatility. Akiteru grinned, joking that he was her producer and manager, though he admitted her skill had always been there. As weeks passed, Iroha grew more comfortable around him. After watching a movie one night, she gushed over one of the actors, calling his performance charming. Akiteru teased her about liking him, but she explained that it wasn't about appearance, it was his playful tone that made the character stand out. Akiteru was caught off guard, and Iroha teasingly told him his understanding of what girls liked was outdated. Their banter became a routine, and they grew closer. Iroha confessed she was starting to understand why Ozuma admired Akiteru so much. Ozuma had once described him as a guiding star, someone who lit up his path. Akiteru was touched, though Iroha jokingly pointed out how his last name even sounded like star. She mentioned that Ozuma seemed happier lately, spending all his time developing the game. She believed Akiteru's friendship was the reason for that. Akiteru humbly denied it, saying he only did what any friend would. Before she left that night, he handed her a present, a new headset, and a spare key to his apartment. He told her she was always welcome to come by to practice or watch movies. Iroha was deeply moved, realizing she finally had a place where she could be herself. In the present, Iroha often looked at the key fondly, cherishing the memories tied to it. Akiteru would joke about her constantly borrowing his things, and she would remind him that he had allowed it. When he teased that she was becoming a nuisance, she playfully said he must be in love with her. He corrected her, saying he only loved her talent, which still made her smile warmly. When Akiteru asked about her home life, she admitted nothing had changed. If it had, she wouldn't still be spending most of her time in his apartment. She thanked him again, saying she owed her growth to him. Akiteru disagreed, insisting she would have been discovered sooner or later, just like Asaji, who had been scouted after their first game and was now pursuing a music career in the United States. Iroha told him to accept people's gratitude instead of denying it. Akiteru realized she had come to remind him how much he meant to those around him. As he looked up at the sky, Iroha suddenly hugged him from behind. He admitted that her embrace was comforting. She then confessed that she wanted to be more than just his friend's little sister, but Akiteru gently reminded her that they weren't that close. Trying to hide her disappointment, Iroha listened as he explained that with Mashiro joining the team, things would change. He wanted everyone to grow together as equals, suggesting they'd go shopping as a group. Though surprised, Iroha agreed, realizing that their small circle had truly become something special. Turns out Akiteru's plan was simple. He wanted everyone to go shopping together. Iroha immediately guessed that Ozuma would refuse and Sumire might also decline since they were all her students. However, she was fairly confident that Mashiro would come along, and she suspected that Mashiro had a crush on Akiteru. Fired up by the idea, Iroha decided that today would be a battle between her and Mashiro, determined not to lose. When the group gathered, only Akiteru, Iroha, and Mashiro showed up. Iroha scolded Akiteru for being late, and Mashiro unexpectedly sided with her. Akiteru couldn't help but notice how well the two got along whenever they teamed up against him. Then out of nowhere, Iroha linked arms with him, leaving him completely flustered. She acted as if it was totally normal, saying friends often did that, but Akiteru silently protested that such things were usually done only between girls. Iroha, however, seemed oblivious to how forward she was being, acting as though this was just how girls interacted. Before Akiteru could say anything, Mashiro shyly linked arms with his other side, insisting that if it was normal, she should do it too. Akiteru tried to tell her it wasn't, but Mashiro refused to believe him. Iroha couldn't stop laughing at the sight of the three of them walking together, teasing that they looked like a proper harem. Akiteru's face turned red, while Iroha, amused by his embarrassment, claimed that her own shame didn't matter as long as she could make him squirm. To start the day, Akiteru suggested they watch a movie, but Iroha and Mashiro immediately disagreed on which one. Each argued passionately for her choice, while Akiteru watched in mild amusement. Iroha accused Mashiro of pretending to be unique by going against popular opinion, while Mashiro countered that Iroha just followed trends without understanding the films deeply. Iroha smugly replied that she had spent hours studying and watching movies. Akiteru pointed out that the only reason she could do that was because she often snuck into his apartment to use his streaming accounts. Iroha instantly replied that his apartment was practically hers too. Shocked by how close they seemed, Mashiro declared that she also visited his place often. Akiteru quickly realized that Iroha was deliberately trying to provoke Mashiro. Hoping to calm things down, he suggested they could each watch their own movie and meet afterward, but both girls scolded him for missing the point of a group hangout. With no other option, Akiteru proposed rock, paper, scissors to decide. Iroha won, so they went with her movie, leaving Mashiro a little disappointed. Afterward, Akiteru admitted the movie was better than he'd expected. Later, they stopped by the food court. When Iroha excused herself, Akiteru assumed she went to the restroom. She invited Mashiro along, but Mashiro declined. Once Iroha was gone, Akiteru asked if Mashiro still felt nervous around her. Mashiro admitted she did, though she knew Iroha was kind. Akiteru reassured her that many people didn't know how to handle Iroha's energy either. Mashiro confessed that Iroha's personality reminded her of people she disliked. Seeing how uneasy she looked, Akiteru told her that she could talk to him anytime. Before Mashiro could respond, two girls from her old school appeared and immediately started mocking her. When they noticed Akiteru, they turned their teasing on him as well. Mashiro froze in fear. Realizing what was happening, Akiteru stepped in to defend her. The girls kept hurling insults, ridiculing Mashiro's writing and threatening to expose her old novel to him. Having heard enough, Akiteru stood up and ordered them to stop. The girls tried to intimidate him, claiming they had a strong friend nearby, but Akiteru shot back that he had far scarier allies. Remembering how terrifying Sumire could be, he knew he wasn't bluffing. Seeing his confidence, one of the bullies whispered to the other that they should leave. They ran off just as Iroha returned. Akiteru checked on Mashiro and asked if those girls were the reason she had stopped going to school. Mashiro quietly confirmed it but refused to talk about the novel. Then without warning, she ran off. Iroha urged Akiteru to chase her, and they decided to split up. After running in circles, Akiteru stopped to think. Remembering Mashiro's earlier interest in a shark movie, he guessed that's where she might have gone. Sure enough, he found her in the theater watching the movie alone. Sitting beside her, he noticed her eyes fixed on the screen. During the film, Mashiro remarked bitterly that the cheerleader who just died had bullied an otaku boy and deserved it. Her tone betrayed deep emotional scars. She then asked why Akiteru had followed her, accusing him of lying and stalking her. Realizing how harsh she sounded, she apologized right away. Akiteru stayed calm, thinking that her anger was at least better than silence. He tried to understand her feelings, imagining the things she might have wanted to say to her bullies. Slowly, Mashiro opened up. She explained that she had always been bad at talking to people and often spent time alone. To escape, she started writing a novel, but when those girls found out, they spread it to the entire class and humiliated her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke. Akiteru gently comforted her, saying that stories written as an escape were often the most genuine. He mentioned that one of his favorite authors was Nemako-sensei, and Mashiro's eyes widened in recognition. He spoke admiringly about Nemako-sensei's work. He recalled that one of Nemako-sensei's novels began with a foreword about hating reality and using writing as a means to cope, a sentiment he deeply related to. Mashiro noted that the author's use of a pen name made her seem embarrassed to be found out, and Akiteru agreed, but added that people shouldn't be denied their passions. He assured her that even if some people didn't value her writing, others definitely would. Mashiro nodded but admitted that Iroha still made her uneasy because she reminded her of her bullies. Akiteru gently patted her head, telling her that while Iroha might seem similar, she was nothing like them. He promised that if Iroha ever upset her, she could always rely on him. She smiled faintly and took his offered hand. Akiteru then messaged Iroha, letting her know he had found Mashiro. When they arrived to meet her, they saw Iroha confronting the bullies herself. Mashiro froze, thinking things were about to get worse, but Akiteru told her to watch. Iroha boldly insulted the bullies for mocking Mashiro, calling them pathetic and worthless. She even shouted that Mashiro was adorable and lucky to have such a perfect boyfriend, loudly enough for everyone around to hear. Then, with a fierce glare, she scolded them for harassing others out of boredom, her expression turning sharp and cold. The girls were visibly shaken. When they asked why she was defending Mashiro despite claiming earlier that they weren't friends, Iroha replied that whether or not they were friends didn't matter, she simply couldn't stand people like them. Just as she was about to hit one of them, Akiteru stepped in and stopped her. Iroha glared at him, and though he knew she wouldn't actually attack, her expression was intimidating enough to make him uneasy. He repeated his warning, telling the bullies never to bother Mashiro again. Terrified, they bowed several times before fleeing. Iroha thanked Akiteru for showing up when he did, admitting that she didn't know how to fight and would have had to fake a punch. He pointed out that she had looked genuinely furious, and she agreed, saying her past self never would have done that. Akiteru then asked Mashiro what she thought of the real Iroha. Iroha quickly apologized for butting in, but Mashiro also apologized for misjudging her. Realizing they had misunderstood each other, Mashiro asked if they could be friends. Iroha's face brightened instantly as she took Mashiro's hands in delight. That evening, Makoto treated Akiteru to dinner to thank him for cheering Mashiro up. He mentioned that Mashiro had made a new friend and asked if it was someone from the 5th Floor Alliance. Akiteru clarified that Iroha wasn't a member. Makoto then guessed that Iroha was the voice actor from his previous game. Akiteru was surprised he figured it out since that information was supposed to be secret. Makoto explained that Mashiro had praised Iroha's acting, which helped him put the pieces together. He promised to keep her identity private, knowing that her mystery added to her charm. Then Makoto suddenly asked if Iroha was Akiteru's girlfriend. Akiteru flatly denied it, and Makoto believed him. However, he also warned Akiteru not to become Mashiro's boyfriend either. Akiteru replied confidently that he wouldn't. He was sure Mashiro didn't see him that way. Makoto gave him a skeptical look but decided to drop it. Meanwhile, Mashiro reflected on how happy she was to have transferred schools and met everyone. Still, she wasn't ready to reveal that she was actually Nemako-sensei. Even though she was thrilled to hear Akiteru praise her work, she wanted to be special to him as herself, not as the author behind the name. Elsewhere, Iroha relaxed in Akiteru's room, listening to music as usual. When he suddenly turned up the volume, she complained that he'd better take responsibility if her eardrums got damaged. With a straight face, Akiteru said he'd marry her to make up for it, then immediately clarified it was a joke. He explained that the headphones weren't loud enough to cause harm, just old from heavy use. Iroha said she used them often to study voice acting. Akiteru told her that if she really appreciated them, she should stop teasing him, but she cheekily replied that teasing him was her way of showing thanks. She admitted that she liked him enough to get jealous of Mashiro, although Akiteru didn't take it seriously. Iroha said she'd been ready to compete for his attention, but in the end, the whole situation had only helped her and Mashiro become friends. Then, Akiteru received a new message from Nemako-sensei. When he opened it, he froze. It was a confession of love directed at him. Akiteru suddenly awakened one morning, completely shocked to find Mashiro lying right on top of him. His first instinct was to pull back, feeling totally unsettled and confused about what was happening. Mashiro, though, stayed perfectly calm as she held out this absolutely massive bowl packed with seafood. encouraging him to eat. The ridiculous amount of food left him completely speechless. When she noticed he was hesitating, her expression immediately turned sad and she apologized, explaining that seafood was literally the only thing she knew how to cook. Her sudden mood swing freaked him out, making him wonder if maybe she hit her head or something. She calmly denied it, telling him she'd just fallen deeply in love with him. Still trying to wrap his head around this weird situation, Akiteru asked if this had anything to do with that confession he vaguely remembered getting. Mashiro set the bowl down and slid back into bed with him, insisting they should act like a normal couple. She started kissing him and pinning him down while he frantically tried to push her away. Only later did he realize the whole thing had just been a dream. In reality, he'd been shoving a popsicle into his own mouth. After taking a moment to process everything, he sighed hard, bit into the popsicle, and sat up. Iroha was standing right in front of him, explaining she was just trying to wake him up like any responsible junior would. He asked her to wake him properly next time, but she complained about how boring his reaction was, especially after being woken up by someone as cute as her. He told her not to whine, pointing out she should be grateful he wasn't some creep. Iroha then started biting into the popsicle while teasing him, wondering out loud what could possibly fluster him. He looked away when he noticed how sloppily she was wearing her uniform. She assumed he was checking out her chest, but he clarified he just couldn't stand how carelessly she dressed. When he asked why she'd shown up so early, she pointed at his digital clock, showing him he was already running an hour late. She said Ozuma had sent her over since he hadn't answered any of her brother's messages. At first he thought it might be another prank, but she insisted she wouldn't go as far as messing with his clock. When he hopefully asked if it was the weekend, she proudly told him it was definitely a weekday. For a second, he considered making a doctor's appointment just to escape, amused by what wrong conclusion the doctor might jump to. Iroha kept urging him to hurry so they could still get to school on time. Akiteru rushed to get ready, unable to stop thinking about Mashiro's confession. He was sure she'd actually sent it, but he could barely remember how he'd responded. When he checked their messages, the confession totally stunned him. The tone didn't match the Mashiro who always acted like she hated him. He questioned whether her feelings could be real when her behavior said the opposite. Still, he knew he had to take it seriously since ignoring it could hurt her. He decided responding honestly was his best option. After getting ready, he and Iroha rushed towards school. At a crosswalk, she suggested he just relax and show up late. He insisted even one tardy could wreck his reputation. She argued one mistake wouldn't destroy anything, but he countered that he couldn't give Sumair any chance to lecture him about being late, especially since he was always nagging her about deadlines. She accepted that, then asked if he was okay being seen with her since Mashiro might get the wrong idea. The second Mashiro's name came up, Akiteru froze, which Iroha took as a perfect chance to tease him about accidentally attracting girls. She warned him that a so-called ladies' man who reached a certain age without ever spending the night with a girl would start losing his appeal. She grabbed his arm and playfully offered herself as practice, claiming it helped prepare him for his first time with Mashiro. Instead of getting flustered like she wanted, he just pulled away and called her a fool. Annoyed her plan didn't work, she got even more irritated when he teased that she should try sneaking into his room at night if she really wanted to catch him off guard. She shouted that she would. While Akiteru ran ahead towards school, Iroha watched him leave with a soft look, knowing their relationship couldn't move forward yet. He made it to his classroom before first period started. Mashiro was sitting by his desk, and he decided to try talking to her about the confession. She treated him like he was nothing but a nuisance and refused to acknowledge the message. She seemed even colder than usual. When he asked if he'd done something wrong, she said just hearing his voice made her sick. Shocked, he wondered if this was really the same girl who'd confessed last night. Hoping for clarity, he texted her. On his phone, she responded shyly, admitting she felt too embarrassed. But when he looked up, she kept glaring at him with that icy stare. When he checked his phone again, the version texting him seemed like a completely different person, one who wanted his attention. The constant back and forth left him stressed and confused. Sumair walked into the classroom, praising everyone for being on time even though she rarely met her own deadlines. Before starting the lesson, she reminded them drama nationals were coming up and encouraged everyone to join the drama club to boost the school's chances. Ozuma tapped Akiteru on the back, worried about how late he'd woken up. Akiteru said everything was fine and he'd just overslept. Ozuma thought he was pushing himself too hard and told him to slow down. Akiteru reminded him not to overwork either, saying the Fifth Alliance wouldn't survive without him. Ozuma then pulled out his phone to discuss the latest game story. Akiteru admitted he'd read it and thought it was terrible. Ozuma agreed and pointed out a confusing scene. Akiteru explained the story had been getting worse and even turned into a musical at the end. Both of them were stunned since the original game was horror, and the sequel should have been too. They wondered if Namako-sensei had run out of ideas. Akiteru felt everything could still be fixed with a proper conversation. A sharp glare suddenly caught their attention. Mashiro was staring at them from across the room. A flicker of jealousy went through her as she thought the two guys looked way too close to just be friends. She quickly dismissed it, but Akiteru noticed and felt even more strained. Dealing with Mashiro's mood swings, Namako-sensei's slump, and all the weird stuff happening in his life left him overwhelmed. He knew he needed to help Namako-sensei get back on track, or the Fifth Alliance might be at risk. Meanwhile, Iroha struggled to focus in class. Her mind kept drifting back to their walk that morning, even though she was usually disciplined and attentive. She'd also felt uneasy after seeing Mashiro's confession. When a classmate said someone was looking for her, she stepped outside and found Mashiro waiting. Since they were still in public, Mashiro put on a polite and gentle act. Iroha noticed but didn't play along. Mashiro mistook her neutral expression as playful behavior and acted timid like a shy animal. When Iroha didn't follow her lead, Mashiro realized she'd misread things and apologized, admitting she thought this kind of performance was normal among high school girls. Iroha found her awkwardness cute but moved the conversation elsewhere once she noticed other students watching. Mashiro admitted she was worried because Akiteru had arrived later than usual, wondering if Iroha knew why. Iroha tried explaining that Akiteru was human and not always predictable, but Mashiro argued he never broke his schedule. Her absolute certainty made Iroha uneasy. Mashiro added that she feared he might be sick. Iroha suggested asking him directly, but Mashiro confessed she was too embarrassed after recent events. She didn't say it outright, but Iroha knew she meant the confession. That also meant Akiteru hadn't responded yet, leaving Mashiro anxious. Iroha felt guilty not telling the full truth, unsure how Mashiro would react. Seeing her genuine concern, she decided to comfort her and explained Akiteru had just overslept from exhaustion and probably wasn't sick, especially since he was strict about his health. Relieved, Mashiro considered eating lunch alone so she wouldn't bother him. Iroha encouraged her to invite him anyway since he usually ate alone, but Mashiro insisted she didn't want to be a burden. Iroha thought if Mashiro acted this sweet in front of Akiteru, he'd fall for her instantly. When the bell rang, Mashiro returned to class but asked if they could talk again sometime. Iroha, surprised, agreed, saying they were friends and could meet any time. After she left, Iroha found herself worrying about Akiteru. During lunch, Akiteru sat alone. He planned to use the break to talk to Mashiro, but she immediately declined. Iroha soon joined him, cheerfully offering to eat together. He scolded her for being too friendly when he was supposedly dating Mashiro, and she argued most students barely knew who he was anyway. She urged him to enjoy lunch with a cute girl and even offered him a rolled omelette, which he refused. She grumbled he was no fun. He corrected her, saying sighing was actually good and suggesting she reflect on her own behavior since she made him sigh so often. When he brought up Mashiro, he explained that since Iroha had seen the confession, he'd been thinking seriously about how to respond. He tried approaching Mashiro, but she still rejected him. When he mentioned it was the first time anyone had ever confessed to him, Iroha felt offended. He noticed her expression change but didn't understand she was upset because she confessed countless times and he'd never acknowledged any of them as real. She grew angrier and suddenly left, her irritation visible to everyone nearby. Moments later, she texted calling him a jerk. Akiteru was stunned. She rarely lost her temper with him. Feeling like everyone was acting weird, he hoped the day wouldn't get worse. Unfortunately, he was called to Sumayor's office again. He paled, fearing what awaited him. Instead, Sumayor excitedly showed him her newest illustration, finished a full week early. Given how chaotic his day had been, he almost snapped, but he forced himself to praise her sincerely. As he tried to leave, Sumayor asked for a favor. Realizing it would cost him more time, he quickly claimed he was sick. Believing him, she let him go. Once outside, he leaned against the wall, weighed down by everything that had happened. Confined to his bed, Akiteru lay frustrated by the time lost to illness. The subtle sounds of movement from the living room alerted him to an intruder, and he soon realized Iroha had let herself in. He emerged to find her in the kitchen wearing an apron and cooking. She explained that she had heard he went home sick and came to check on him. Akiteru was immediately suspicious. Iroha usually dropped her polite school persona when they were alone, yet she was maintaining a facade of concern. Sensing his doubt, she assured him she wasn't planning any mischief and instructed him to return to bed while she finished his meal. He obeyed, and Iroha soon entered his room with a tray. She placed the food on his table but insisted on feeding him herself, claiming an obligation to look after him. She reasoned that his fatigue was likely worse than he admitted and reminded him of his own maxim that health was his greatest asset. She urged him to accept her care just this once to speed his recovery. Akiteru begrudgingly agreed. Iroha began spooning porridge to his mouth, carefully blowing on each bite to cool it. Akiteru marveled at the cliché unfolding before him, but was genuinely surprised by the quality of the food, eventually finishing the entire bowl. When she used a towel to gently wipe his mouth, he apologized embarrassed, but she reassured him of her sincere desire to help. She promised to clean up and leave immediately so he could rest. After she departed, Akiteru stared at the door, half expecting her to rush back in with a playful declaration that she was staying. When she didn't, he messaged her asking if he was being tricked. Her reply was unexpectedly harsh. He realized she was acting in opposition to Mashiro, who had been sweet via text but distant in person. Iroha, conversely, was sweet in person but cold in text. Both girls were perplexing him with their inconsistencies, and his headache returned as he tried to navigate the relationships. The phone rang. It was Ozuma. He claimed he knew Akiteru was stressed because of a heart rate monitor he had secretly installed. Akiteru called the idea creepy, but Ozuma laughed, clarifying it was a joke. He had simply seen Iroha arrive home and shut herself in her room, implying something had happened. Akiteru considered confiding in Ozuma, but decided it was too complicated, especially given Ozuma's ignorance of Mashiro's confession. Sensing the silence, Ozuma deduced the topic was sensitive and dropped it. They shifted to discussing Namako's latest scenario drafts. Akiteru proposed rejecting the draft in their group chat and tasked Ozuma with backing him up to ensure Namako understood the idea was genuinely unpopular. Ozuma agreed and told Akiteru to prioritize his health. Feeling substantially better, Akiteru decided he was well enough to work. By the following day, Akiteru felt fully recovered. He planned to finalize Iroha's voice recordings after school and message her about it. She responded by demanding he beg her to do the work. They argued over text until she finally relented. He then noticed Mashiro furiously typing on her phone, likely working on her novel. Despite wanting to repair their relationship, he felt compelled to catch up on the Fifth Floor Alliance's work. He hoped to give Mashiro a proper answer soon, but she wasn't creating opportunities to talk, and he feared he might be forced to reply via text if the standoff continued. During a break, Sumair intercepted him to confirm his fever was gone. Upon hearing he was fine, she insisted he follow her to show him something crucial. Remembering he had declined her previous attempts due to his workload, he agreed. In her counseling room, Sumair pleaded with Akiteru to save the drama club. The club faced disbandment unless they passed the regional preliminaries of the National High School Drama Fair. The principal, who held low regard for the club, had made this their final chance. Akiteru failed to see the problem, noting that disbandment would free up her time for their company's art. Sumair explained that her younger sister Midori was the club president. Although Akiteru couldn't recall meeting her, Sumair praised Midori's excellence, hinting that Midori handled the advisory duties, allowing Sumair to slack off and focus on drawing. However, if the drama club dissolved, Sumair would be reassigned to the competent girls' tennis team. That assignment would require actual work, eliminating her free time for art. Akiteru questioned how she could possibly coach tennis, and Sumair admitted she had used her formal persona to fake competence to the principal. Akiteru scolded her for prioritizing her image over reality, but acknowledged he hadn't helped to protect her productivity for their alliance. He asked if the drama club was truly in such a bad state. Sumair confirmed their situation was dire, promising to meet all her art deadlines if he helped them secure passage through the preliminaries. Though he chastised her again, reminding her that deadlines were non-negotiable, he eventually agreed to attend a practice session during lunch. The practice was held in a haunted classroom at the end of the fourth-floor hall. Peering inside, Akiteru recognized Midori, the school's top student and a prodigy who balanced perfect scores with club duties. He wryly remarked that a DNA test might be needed, as she was nothing like Sumair. He initially felt reassured by Midori's competence, but his optimism vanished when the dress rehearsal began. The girls performed stiffly in bizarre mushroom costumes. The acting was lifeless, the lighting ill-suited, and a misplaced gong that Midori struck repeatedly made the nonsensical script inaudible. When the play ended, Akiteru told Sumair he couldn't understand how the production was so fundamentally flawed. Sumair smiled, knowing seeing the practice would convince him of their impending failure. Midori, however, was thrilled, telling the members they had scored at least an 80. Unable to stay silent, Akiteru stepped forward and declared the performance terrible. The club was shocked. He explained that he couldn't let them believe they had done well when the quality was worse than an elementary school play. Midori tried to defend the club, insisting they were better than he thought, though she admitted their recent progress had stalled. Noticing Sumair, Midori commented on her sister's recent involvement. Sumair announced that with the competition approaching, she wanted to lead them to victory as their advisor. The girls were moved, and Sumair introduced Akiteru. Midori assumed he was a new member and tried to reject him, but Sumair corrected her, introducing him as their super producer. Midori complained that Akiteru looked plain and boring, but Sumair insisted he was a talented producer capable of elevating the club. Midori reluctantly accepted the idea but questioned his credentials. To Akiteru's horror, Sumair lied, claiming he had produced several hit Hollywood movies. The girls seemed to believe the fabrication and eagerly anticipated his advice. However, Midori then inquired about his relationship with Sumair, insinuating that Hollywood producers were known for illicit relationships with beautiful women, a category she believed Sumire fit. Akiteru immediately denied any romantic interest and declared he would not stay to be insulted. He turned to leave. The girls panicked and Sumire caught up to him near the stairs. He explained that while he could have helped, he refused to produce the entire effort, especially given Midori's hostility. Sumire tried to persuade him, but Akiteru pointed out the main issue was the actor's inability to perform, a skill he claimed he couldn't teach. He intentionally hid the fact that he could coach them, as doing so risked revealing Iroha's secret identity as their voice actress. He told Sumire the discussion was over, citing his own group's problems and lack of time. When Sumire pleaded again about the tennis team reassignment, Akiteru scolded her, stating she was obligated to illustrate regardless of her club status. He insisted that as their advisor, she needed to find a solution herself. As he walked away, his thoughts shifted to Iroha. He was certain she would excel on stage, but her circumstances prevented her from ever getting the chance.